I'm coming to you from Mosman, so I'd like to do acknowledgement of country at Mosman. Mosman Council recognises the traditional inhabitants of this land, the Camaragal and Borrogeagle people, and pays respects to their elders, past and present. It's really wonderful to have Mary Lee here this evening to talk about her book, Mary's Last Dance, which is published by Penguin Random House. Mary, of course, is known to many of you as the wife of Li Cunxin, but is a professional and well-regarded dancer in her own right. Mary was born in Rockhampton. She's come a long way from Rockhampton, travelling all over the world, being a professional dancer to much acclaim, coming back to living in Houston, then coming to Melbourne, then finally back to Brisbane, where she resides now. We're really excited to have you here this evening, Mary. So I just thought I'd ask you a few questions to start up with. I really enjoyed your book, and some of the parts that I liked reading about was actually in your first, when you were talking about when you were living in Rockhampton and first becoming a ballerina. I just wanted to ask you first though, what was the experience like of writing a memoir and just opening up about a very personal topic about your Sophie's deafness, your daughter?
Well, it's a very long and arduous process writing a book, and I never intended to write a book as I was very busy with my children, and I'm a very private person. But a lot of people have been interested in my story ever since the publication of Li's book in 2003, which is about 17 years ago. But it was my daughter, Sophie, who said, "Mum, your story is really important. And it's not only going to help the deaf community, but so many other people." And she said, personally, we as a deaf, population haven't really been talked about. And there just isn't a story of living with a child with deafness. And that really rung true to me, because when Sophie was diagnosed profoundly deaf, there was nothing, no book, no Google, no internet, nothing. So everything you had to, go by your instincts or hearsay or just guess. So it was really important, no matter what path you choose with a child with extra needs, it's nice to just hear someone else going through it, really. And my specialty was deafness, but I mean, there's lots of families that have different children with different difficulties, and that's what Sophie thought was really important. And that rang true to me, and she said she would help me. So I was like, great.
Good job, Sophie.
Yeah.
I'll come back to when you first received the diagnosis later, but as I was saying, one of my favourite sections is the beginning when you're talking about living in Rockhampton, and it's such a gorgeous sentence. You say, "I was the most unlikely candidate to be a ballerina, if ever there was one. I had buck teeth, and then there was my untamable hair and my big black boat shoes." So can you tell us just how it was that you came to have this love of being a ballet and being a ballerina and being on the stage from that, incongruous beginning?
Well, I grew up in a very rowdy household of 8 children. I was the eldest girl, and we thought that Mum would just go up the road every year and produce a baby and then come home. So after the 8th one, we thought, why are they not coming anymore? So you can imagine the sort of chaos in the house, although she was very loving and gorgeous. And we were not disciplined badly, but we, mercilessly, but we were encouraged to look after each other. So, and to play with each other as well, although we had some mates, but usually it ended up just being the top gang and the bottom gang. So there was the 4 oldest ones and the 4 youngest ones. But anyway, when I was about 8, a friend of my mother's who had a little girl in my class at school said, "Would Mary like to go along to the ballet lessons?" And my mother thought that would be so great, make me ladylike possibly. And so off I went, and I was quite old, actually. I was 8, and I went into a class of like 5-year-olds, and they were all in their little white dresses and pink sashes and hair beautifully done by their mothers. And my mother couldn't even manage my hair with the knots underneath. And mostly you couldn't find a hairbrush in our house, or a toothbrush, or a dry towel, or anything. So I just went in my black leotard and the only ballet shoes you could get at the time, because Mum didn't realise you had to send away for them. So they're just from Mathers, you know, like flat sole and a black shoe. Anyway, I went to my first ballet class surrounded by these beautiful would-be ballerinas and me. And I still remember jumping in the air to the first time and thinking this was marvelous. And I actually had great elevation, and I don't know if that was natural or that was just because I jumped on trampoline all my life. And but since I wrote the book, because I contacted Maurice, who was that lady that took me to the first ballet class, the girl, and I asked her all about it, and she said the teacher took a liking to you from the beginning, and she said that was it for the two of you. So there you go.
And was it a very busy ballet scene in Brisbane, Rockhampton, Queensland as such in those days? Was there a Queensland?
Look, in Queensland then there was swimming, football, and luckily ballet. And
Okay.
And this teacher was an absolute marvel, and she demanded perfection and discipline, and she created some amazing concerts, and she just knew things that I wanted to know. And she taught us Scottish, Irish, you know, we had character dances, we had improvisation, we choreographed at the end of the year for her in a concert. I mean, she was just really ahead of her time, and she really knew what she was talking about. And as she got more confident, she encouraged my parents to send me overseas. If I got into the Royal Ballet School, she thought that would be, that I would learn a great deal and we would see what happened. And I did get into the Royal Ballet School, and that was an amazing experience, because I just got there to Talguth Road. Ex-ballerinas were my teachers, Julia Farron, Pamela Fay. I mean, they were still on stage at the Opera House doing the character roles in Romeo and Juliet and such. And then, you know, I got a job in London via Rudolph Nureyev. So there you go.
Are you still in touch with any of the young girls who you performed with all those years ago in Rockhampton?
Yes, in Rockhampton. Well, Maurice, who was the girl I went with, she's now a principal in a school in in Melbourne. And I have a great friend who, it was my friend at ballet's sister, and she ended up teaching my daughter ballet. So yeah, there is, and there is a camaraderie. My sisters learnt ballet as well, and they have a lot of their friends. Yeah, so we are in touch, definitely.
Well, your time in London as a ballerina, albeit almost starving, I think, because you had very little money to pay for groceries, was a really interesting time as well to read about. And then when you didn't have a visa, which was all a little bit scary at the time. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Trying to make ends meet on little money and
Yes. Well, I got offered the job through Rudolph Nureyev. I originally did the audition with 200 other girls, and I didn't get in. But 6 weeks later, or maybe it was a month later, the ballet mistress called me because she remembered me from our Royal Ballet School performance at Covent Garden. And she said, she called me and said, please come and do classes with Festival Ballet. So I went in and I found my place at the bar. There was only a girls' dressing room and a boys' dressing room. And as I looked up, I saw this man in a big fur coat, big boots, big wraparound, and it was Rudolph Nureyev. And so I did my first classes there with Rudolph, and then went back to the school and said, you know, I'm going to join this contract, because I had to, you know, I'd signed for a second year, and so I had to kind of break that contract. Anyway, they were very happy for me. But when I did get into Festival Ballet and started a couple of weeks later, Dame Beryl Gray came up to me and said, oh, sorry, Petty, you'll have to go, your visa's not right. So I was devastated, and I left the building, sobbed my heart out down Kensington High Street. And when I got to my apartment, I lived with a couple of South African girls. Or actually, they were from Rhodesia, because they used to go to the Royal Ballet School as well. And one of them was in the Royal Ballet. And she said, don't worry, you can just go to France. with my brother. He's going this weekend, and you just come back through passport control and just tell them you're going to work in a bar and they'll stamp your visa. And that's exactly what I did. And then I walked in with my visa and I said, I have a visa now to work. And Rudolph was taking us all to Australia in July. And I said, when I leave Australia, my father will get me another visa. So they were like, okay. And, and when I think back about that now, it was very bold.
You had chutzpah, that's for sure.
People. And I was like, there you go. So very brave, I think.
Do you think the same opportunities would be available now for young people trying to break through in ballet in London? Like, is it still just really difficult?
Very difficult. Very difficult. And if you had that visa situation like me, because they just used to stamp work visas when you crossed to Europe and came back in, but that doesn't happen now. Or you could probably get, that there's a 2-year visa before you're under 30 or something. So I guess I could have done something. I'm not sure how it is now, but it's never easy to get a job.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite performance, remembering back over your career, that fills you with joy and happiness? Because you've performed many roles over the years.
I have so many. To me, look, I adore the performance, but for me, the working on a particular ballet is what's amazing. And I suppose all the Romeo and Juliets, although I only did it once in a pas de deux with Li, I didn't do the whole ballet with him. But because I grew up, the first thing that Rudolph did in Festival Ballet was his Romeo and Juliet, and we did it all over the world. And I watched, every death scene. I watched every pas de deux. So that music was just so innate in my body when I got to do it. So I suppose doing any Juliets, and of course any dancing I did with my husband, because he was such a marvelous partner.
Just going to the point of when I'll let the readers read in the book about when you marry Li and you have your gorgeous daughter Sophie. To me, it really hit me like a bullet. Like, it was the doctor who told you that Sophie was profoundly deaf had no bedside manner at all. To me, it was very difficult to read. So it must have been incredibly hard for you to hear. Can you tell us a bit about that blunt conversation and perhaps what's some advice you'd give to people now who would have that conversation about their child from their doctor?
Well, I hope something like that never happens to anyone else. So I think, it was America. And you go and see a pediatrician for every visit, every injection. So the fact that he missed Sophie's profound deafness was incredible. So we pushed him. So basically you're just set up with, a clinician or professor that does ABRs. So you take your little girl in, they inject them because they have to be passed out, and then they send in sounds while they're asleep so that they can tell the level of deafness. So if it's moderate, severe, or profound. And so she was out for about 2 hours. Then she was wheeled back in. I still remember what she was wearing: little red shoes, little blue denim skirt and jacket, which Ben Stevenson, my artistic director, had bought her from Italy. And the professional, or I guess the person that was just administering the ABR, just walked in and said she's profoundly deaf. He didn't even know her name. And we were just sitting there on our own, just sitting in the booth waiting. And we were just completely devastated and gobsmacked. And we just kept looking at our little girl, and we went home in the car. And of course, we realized that she was reading our expressions the whole time. And of course, we were very sad. And then we were thinking, we can't be sad, or we just didn't know what to do. But she could read our expressions. So it was very hard on her as well. So,
and it was very moving, the relationship you had with Li's parents as well. It was so sad, a decision that had to be made as well to help her.
Well, it was devastating because Li's dream was always that she would speak. So Li's parents came from China when Sophie was 2 months old, and they had a beautiful time with Li because he'd gone when he was 11. So they hadn't really ever had time with Li. And then he left and went to America. He defected and went to America. So they never really spent any time with them. So for them to have their son, as well as a baby girl, because they had 7 boys, and they never really, in China then they were starving, they're just working. So this time they could really just have fun, and they were actually only 60. So it was quite young, and he was very fit, and they had each other, and they had Li, and they had Sophie, and she was going to speak Chinese. So it was all just quite magical. So it was doubly devastating for them. And then later on, going into this world of deafness, I was advised that there shouldn't be 2 languages in the household, because it would slow her language acquisition up, and that, she needs to just hear one language. And they're very different languages.
Yes. As you said this evening, there was not a lot of information available to you or anyone about helping Sophie or helping anyone who was profoundly deaf. Was there a certain turning point in the whole process when somehow the path ahead seemed a bit more navigable for you? Was there a bit of a light in the tunnel that happened? It seemed like it was obviously a hard slog.
I think when I got the implant, because at the time the implant wasn't they weren't very positive about it, and there was no research, there was no nothing. So you're kind of going in blind, and everyone thinks when you're hooked up, the lights go on, you go, wow. But when a child has no language, you have to read the expression in their eyes to see what they're hearing and what they're not hearing. So when she turned on, it was, I had to guess what she was hearing. But then about 3 weeks later, she was just playing with some things, and I was just going, rain, rain, go away. And then she went, nah, 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 nah. So she and I nearly died. I just thought, oh my God, she can hear. And for me, that was very, very transitional. So, and I guess probably from that moment on, I didn't worry about what she could hear, what she could say, I just kept pumping in that language constantly. And then, I don't know, about 8 months later, they just start babbling. So she had to go through all those steps of a child with language. And most days were pretty hard, but some days were triumphant when she would say something, and Li and I, and then as the years go on, she took lots of challenges on and did things. And when someone has come from there to do something, like she got top marks in VCE for her dance, like Premier's Award for dance so those moments for Li and I were just like so special. And she got up and spoke in front of 15 people. In fact, with the book, she's done a couple of talks with us, and both Li and I gone, she's just the most amazing public speaker, and she has all the timing and all the thinking, and she's so knowledgeable about living with deafness, and so accepting of being in both worlds. And she's a mature woman now, because when you have a language delay, there's an emotional immaturity as well. So things have to catch up. That takes a long time. Yeah.
I was interested to read in the book that it compelled Li to pronounce words more clearly in English as well, because obviously English is a second language. So, yeah.
And also with Chinese speech, he had, some intonations and some syntax the wrong way round, and some rhythms of language. So I used to sing, 3 words and 5 words, and, where you dip at the end. And, it's just because you have to make, with a deaf child that you want to learn to hear or speak, you have to make it auditorily interesting, because otherwise they just, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, they couldn't care what you're saying. So I really pushed that in physically. It makes me tired thinking about it.
Was there something in your ballet career, was there some characteristic that really pulled you through this whole process of trying to help Sophie? Was there some,
Yeah,
you're a very determined person.
yeah, I think probably, definitely the discipline. So I, as soon as I got her up, I put those hearing aids on and I started talking about what I was doing, what we were doing, where we were going. And I was so focused. And I think that's kind of, that focus is automatic. And I suppose with the ballet, you're just forever perfecting. You're just never giving up. And yeah, I guess that did make the difference, really.
And there's a section in the book where it's very definitive, where you decide your career is on hold now. Was it that simple in your mind? And at the time, it was very, very clear that you decided that was it.
It took me a few weeks, but we were performing in Canada. I had to do the trip. I didn't want to leave Sophie because I felt, with that, even though she was with Li's parents, I just felt she was so vulnerable. I thought they were vulnerable. And we were finishing it off. And I was thinking, I can't bring her into my world. I have to be her communicator. And, I fished around for a few people that could do it. And there was no one like me. And particularly, I just imagined a life not hearing my daughter speak or having a conversation. And I just couldn't, that for me was worse. So I wanted to speak to my daughter.
Both your parents and Li's parents were really remarkable people, and they supported you both in various ways. There's a scene in the book where they meet, I think it's in Brisbane, and they're both shaking hands, but both their hands are clasping each other's hands. It was a real connection between them, even though they didn't speak the same language. What's their legacy to your family?
Oh, look, I think love of family. I mean, they both, they had 7 children. My parents had 8 children. I think they just understood that, and they produced a beautiful son. And I think my parents were very proud of me as well. And we were happy together, and we needed to be happy because this was going to be a big challenge. Actually, no, we didn't know about Sophie, but even having a baby was going to be a big challenge for us, having careers. So, and both sets of parents, I think that's another reason for writing the book, because those people are enshrined. I mean, Coralie and Neil were just so special. Anyone you speak to, and then So I'm so glad they're in the book. They're just beacons of light.
What surprised you most about yourself once you were fully immersed in the role of trying to help Sophie? What was there, something that surprised you that you could achieve that you didn't think you could?
I don't know that there was any surprises for me, because I don't really think about it. I just do what I need to do. But what did surprise me was Sophie. So, because there was never an outcome. No one could ever give you an outcome. You just tried very hard. But to have Sophie sit with me for the final edit of the book, Li sat opposite me and Sophie on that side and me, and we did the final read together. It took a couple of days. And I just thought, that is the most surprising thing in my life. I will never forget it. I could never imagine that she would be sitting beside me, going through every sentence and checking things, and also kind of loving every minute of it as well. So there's just no way I could have done it without her. And that was the biggest surprise.
Is she an outgoing kind of person?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And very, very determined. Very. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering if you had any messages to give to parents of deaf children, anything they should consider.
You have to enter another world. It's another world. It's not the world that you had. And there's many choices to make, and not any choice is better than the other. So I just feel whatever choice you need to make for your family. I mean, I made the choice for Sophie to speak because I had Chinese parents, that was her grandparents, and I had Australian parents, and American Sign does not translate to Auslan. Auslan doesn't, Chinese sign is different. So the universal language was English. And from English, she could gather other languages. And she does. She's a fluent signer now, and she also speaks a little bit of Chinese. And she did learn a little bit of Spanish as well. So she likes languages.
Yeah, likes learning.
Yeah. So it's, you know, and she can communicate. Like, she went to China and she learned a bit of Chinese, but she could communicate. So, and she, like, we went to the ballet the other night, and she took a couple of deaf friends and a couple of hearing friends, and my husband was doing a speech, and she just signed to her deaf friends. And so, you know, she just lives in both worlds, which I think's amazing. And it's just beautiful, and she thinks it's so natural, and I think it's amazing.
Just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, Mary. For the past 10 years, you've been ballet mistress at Queensland Ballet. What's that like for you?
Oh, I love it. It's been a challenging year, but we've been here 8.5 years now, and the company's grown to 48 dancers and 12 young artists. And luckily for us, living in Queensland, we were able to just do Giselle. And then we did 5 quick performances of Nutcracker, and we've got our last season of 60 stories, 60 dancers, which the dancers created in COVID. And it's been, very successful. So we're just so lucky to be dancing. And I taught class today, rehearsed some stuff for next year, and it's the perfect job, really, for me. Yeah.
Do you think that anyone will make a movie of Mary's Last Dance?
I have no idea. My daughter Sophie is very determined, says it must be a mini series.
There could be a mini series. There could well be. Yeah. Do you have a favourite part of the book?
Oh, the first chapter.
Really enjoyed, writing about the whole thing, or
my family?
Yeah,
the first chapter, and also the joy of so I would write, and then I'd go to work, and Sophie would type it all up, and then often she'd start reading it, and she's just laughing her head off. And so culturally, because deaf children, when they are acquiring language, they don't get the nuance and the humour of certain things. So to hear her laugh over the Australiana humour, where she didn't grow up with that, it was just wonderful. That was amazing. So, and I just love writing about Neil and George, and then chatting to my brothers about it too, and hearing some of the stories. And it was like, it was chaos and a laugh a minute, and tall to small, small to tall.
Yeah.
There's lots of stories that missed out in there that we remembered, getting being dewormed, in a line, and then high pole, which is lots of other families did as well. And Dad with the water cooler. They're just very special. And Dad, the architecture, the design of our house with no doors and windows, so the children wouldn't get their fingers cut in the doors, and the non-slip cement floor, which is like really trendy now, but we had that. And the trampoline. No, it's just amazing.
Well, the trampoline helped you when you were in ballet school, as I recall reading. Yes.
And the dinner table, we all had stools. We had a stool, bench stool, school bench stools, so that we wouldn't tip over backwards. I mean, he was so ahead of his time, Neil George. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, does anyone have any questions for Mary? If you do, just start typing away. Okay, Mary, we've got a few questions for you.
Lovely.
We've got one: as a parent of a bilateral cochlear implant child who was diagnosed as profoundly deaf, this person's interested to hear about how the hearing of music impacted Sophie's ability to dance and comprehend music and movement.
Yeah, very interesting question. I think that her musical ability developed quite slowly. and I put her into ballet, really for speech lessons, because A, there was no noise, B, everyone is facing the teacher and they're directly following instructions, and the teacher presses the tape, and it's hard for implanted children to hear the tape. Piano probably easier, but through a second modem it's harder. But that was training her to listen when it was turned on and when it was stopped. And then she did tap and jazz. So as the years went on, she developed that involvement in music. And then I also had to learn the cello, and she loved doing that, not to a high level. And I also had to learn the piano, but it's not like hearing children. But she now, because the implant is so great with Bluetooth and everything, so she loves music, and she loves going to the ballet. And but I think it's actually it just doesn't happen like hearing children. I think it kind of has to evolve and be taught, if that makes any sense. They need help because they don't hear like we hear.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
We have another question. Were there any levels of jealousy from your husband or children about the amount of extra time you had to focus on Sophie?
Yeah, very interesting question. Lots of people have asked me this question, and I haven't even asked my children. I haven't had time to ask my two children. So I don't think so. Tom was very close to Sophie, and he interpreted for her a lot. And he understood from a very early age that she had a hearing loss. And I think it's grown him into a very empathetic man. And I think he's actually a teacher now, and he's a marvelous teacher, and with young children. So I think Lee took up a lot of the slack with Tom. And then when Princess Bridie was born, Sophie was 8. So she actually doesn't even think Sophie has a hearing loss. She forgets. If she doesn't have her implants on, she just goes talk and goes. Sophie goes, "So, Bridie, I can't hear you. I've got to put my implants on." So, but then when Sophie has had her real struggles, they really knew about it and they really wanted to help. So, and I don't think they would have traded places.
Okay.
So I think they really understood it's hard.
Yeah. Another person would like to know how Sophie's hearing is now.
So since the book was published, since it wasn't published, since it went to the publishers and we were finished, or actually during the last editing, Sophie had to be reimplanted at 30 a year ago, which was very traumatic. So the implant doesn't last a lifetime. And so she had to have it out. She had to have a new implant put in, which is very traumatic. And when she had it out, the implant was leaking. But it's a computer. So it has, it was 1991. So imagine a computer that we have now.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, it's different sound. So for that 26 years, she had a certain sound. This one's different. So the brain took a little bit of time to readjust. And so it was very difficult for Sophie because it kind of stopped her life, except for the book. So somehow I think the book was meant to be, because that was the one thing she could do, because it was difficult to go and talk to other people and all of that, because but now she's great. So a year on, or a little over a year, she had it in June, so it's about a year and a half. She's fabulous. So, and this will last for another, maybe 30 years. So
wow.
Yeah.
Was Mary's Last Dance always going to be the title of your book, or did you have an alternative?
Conversations with My Daughter was an alternative. And there were quite a few, but people thought that would only encompass the deafness and not my career and my life. So they wanted it to be broader than that. And so we didn't have a title. We had lots we were playing with. And then we had a group of dancers over just before COVID, when we're having a final close down. And we said, okay, let's just have a chat around. Let's do some crunching here. We haven't settled on the title. So we were just playing around, and then we said, it should be last. It's got to have last, and it's got to have dance. And someone just went, Mary's last dance. And we went, that's it.
That's the one.
That's the one. And we sent that to, I don't know why we didn't come up with it before, but we hadn't in the 2 years. And we sent that to Penguin, and they loved it as well. That was it. Done.
It's perfect.
Also, it's MLD. It's the same. Who would have thought it? So that was one of our teachers from the ballet that came and said, that's it. Yeah, there we were. We hit on it. There were quite a few other titles too, but I can't remember them now.
Someone else is commenting that your story and determination, as well as Sophie's, is inspirational, and they can't wait to read the book. So that's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Someone else is commenting that when they were a child in Melbourne, they knew someone at Monash University, a professor of disability education at Monash University. Did you ever have any contact with anyone from Monash Uni? Wouldn't think so. No. There's another question here, or comment. Ben from Houston Ballet played such a huge role in both yours and Lee's lives. Mm-hmm. Is he still part of your world, or is that ballet another part of your world? So, and also, what are your other children doing now?
Very much so. Ben Stevenson, who was my artistic director and choreographer, and was with Houston Ballet for 25 years. He's still running a company in Texas, in Dallas. And yes, we are in contact. We speak with him every couple of weeks because unfortunately he's in lockdown, and he very much appreciates the chat. And we love him dearly. And he gave us a great deal. And we've just done his Nutcracker just now. So we did do his Cinderella. That was one of the first ballets. And he did come and inspire the dancers, and they just loved him. So it was great. He's nearly 85.
Oh, wow.
So we're hoping to get to see him on his 85th, but let's wait and see. But particularly now that Lee's running the company, because he had that experience with Ben. I mean, Ben was amazing, and what he did with his generosity and spirit and what he built. And so I think Lee's had a great mentor in Ben. Yeah.
And what are your two other children doing now, Tom and Bridie? It's another question.
So Tom he was running a language school in Shanghai, and he came home with his girlfriend in the end of January, and luckily they got stuck here. So they continued to run the school from our living room. And then on end of October, they moved to Melbourne, and they're North Melbourne. Tom's still teaching at that, running that language school in Shanghai. I'm not sure for how long. And Michaela's setting up some program online for ESL. So they're very happy, and yes, they're great.
Given that you're a very private person, were there parts of the book you weren't sure about including or found hard to write?
I did. I found hard to write. But I think once you go down this path, you have to. And my editor was fabulous and very good at kneading out what needed to be said. And then, yeah, so I'm pretty open in the book, actually. So, yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to write it. It's hard to put it down there. But then once it goes out and people have loved it, and I do love the fact that I've written about that generation, which is my parents' generation, that were very unassuming, and no one told them they were going to be anything or do anything, and they got married and they just did what they regularly did. Like my dad was an architect, but he did design a theatre and a couple of churches and a hospital and, you know, significant things. And my mother raised 8 healthy children, and we still speak to each other. And there's a generation, and I think of my mum's friends, and they were marvelous. And you know, the ballet teacher said, send me to London. And they were like, okay, you know, but they didn't have great expectations or anything like that. They just, you know, expected us to work hard, really. And they were a lovely generation, and they survived. So I'm really glad, because there's not a lot written about them. And they just...
Someone else would like to know how many edits the book went through.
Well, first I had 160,000 words, and then it went to 460, and then I'd say 7 edits.
Someone else would like to know, how much sign language have you learned?
Fairly basic. The alphabet, sisters, brothers, colours. I can sign small sentences, but when I do it with my daughter, she helps me what I've forgotten. So we were doing it regularly in COVID, and you need to do it regularly. So I'll just keep trying. So I'm okay, but I have a small vocab. Yeah.
What are some of your favourite aspects about ballet, and what's it like performing on the stage?
I love jumping, but not now, too old. But and I love port de bras, which I didn't really like when I was a youngster. And I love the process of rehearsing and knowing that when you get on the stage, because you've worked so hard and you've worked it all out, it's just free to feel. So you know, I love that. And the orchestra, of course. If you get an orchestra, you just think, gosh, how lucky to have an orchestra.
Did you ever feel a sense of hopelessness when teaching Sophie to speak? Asked another person.
Yes. Yeah. Look, and maybe it's not for everybody. I'm not professing that is for everybody. And I had a husband, fortunate enough, he was worked, and he earned enough money for me not to work. So, and it is absolutely relentless, and sometimes very tiring on the child. Maybe the child doesn't want to do that either. So, you know, and maybe you have other children, and, you know, so there's so many circumstances that I would not profess to say. But for me and my family at that point, the speaking was important, and any little words she did have gave me great joy. But only I could have done it. I couldn't have handed her over to someone else to speak. It really took that one person.
Yes, the constant one person. Yeah.
And it was a long constant, I'd say 13, 14 years.
How was your experiencing, I think it's Qingdao?
Yeah.
Someone's asking that question.
Oh, I love Qingdao. Fabulous. And it's changed so much, because I went there first in 88 when the commune, and then stayed in the commune and the hole in the ground, which was terrifying. And then they moved all the communes down, and they stayed in the same place but built them apartments. So they went into that. Yes. So I loved going. I loved the food, and I love the people of Qingdao, and I love all the fish. I never liked fish until I went to Qingdao.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know. I love it now.
Someone else is asking, do you have any inspiration, such as any favourite performing artist or ballerina?
At the moment, look, I have many. I love Alina Kotchakoro, and I love Vadim, and I love Marianella, and I love Ashley Boulder, and I love Natasha Osipova, and I love my own dancers at QB.
What was the hardest part about living in Houston? Someone's asked.
Yeah, it was a bit of a culture shock, huge culture shock, actually, going from London to Houston. But I think I'm one of those people. I made the decision, so I had to live with it and I had to make it most. And I didn't look back, and I got quite lonely. Then I thought, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to call somebody I know that I just met, and we became great friends. So, yeah, it was a big culture shock, but I think I make those decisions and then I live with it. I don't know who taught me that.
Someone's asked, how long did you take to write the book from beginning to submitting for print?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, okay.
Yeah.
Is the bandit still alive and well? He was the one who used to pick you up at the airport when you came. He was so central to Lee's story.
Definitely alive and well, and I just loved him. And he doesn't speak any English, but again, there's that love that he had. And when I first met him, I rode on the back of his bicycles through Beijing. I'd have to like close my eyes, but he was a master, much better than Lee was back on the bike. Yeah.
What does Sophie do now? Job, study, someone's asked?
Yeah. So when Sophie went to China, she'd started working on an app for a sign language dictionary, because she said there isn't one. So it's like a live dictionary. And when she was in Shanghai, she had to get a coder to help finish this app. And when she went to the coder, he said, you should do this, because deaf people are often very visual. So she actually applied for a course and did a coding course, which she loved. So she's now in a job where she does a bit of soft coding, and she does websites, and she does a bit of work for NDIS with support work for deaf people.
Someone's asked, do you think your life would have been different if you'd raised your children in America, all three of your children?
Yes, I think definitely. Yeah, culturally they're very different. And I kind of longed for that Australian upbringing. And I think lots of Australians do. Once you have children. I was away for, 40 years nearly.
Wow.
40 years, 25 years overseas, but then 17 years in Melbourne before I came up to spend time. My mother passed away last year, and was just so lucky to spend those last 3 or 4 years with her. And she just lived around the corner, and have a coffee on the way to work. And that was very special, having her at the end of my life. And we had great conversations. I guess maybe that was another reason it was so important for me with Sophie. Even though my mother wasn't a ballet mother in the beginning, she was very worldly, very well read, very beautiful, gentle woman, very wise. And I could talk to her about anything. And she was always very wise counsel. And she knew me very well. And I missed that. So, but those conversations with her were very important.
Someone else has asked us, do you teach ballet to deaf students, and how do your performances get advertised?
So I don't teach deaf students. I don't teach students. I teach professionals, and our performances are advertised on Facebook, our Queensland Ballet website. And sometimes we do have Q&A with interpreters. And
someone's asked quite a good question, this one. If you could tell your younger self anything, what would you tell her?
Probably to just take it easy sometimes, a little bit, like to not, just to give yourself a break sometimes, which is what I'm doing now. Fun.
And another person's asked, how is Lee's family doing?
They're great. Well, two of them, let me see. One family member is in Melbourne. My nieces are in Melbourne. They came and lived with us. They both have babies. Another one's in China, and those 3 brothers are still in Qingdao.
Uh-huh.
4 brothers, yeah.
Someone's asked, what's the name of Sophie's app, and can we get a link for her NDIS work?
Her app is called Sign How, and I don't think it's up yet. I'm not even sure if I was supposed to talk about it. That's what my mother used to say to me.
We'll watch this space. Yeah.
And she works for NDIS in Brisbane, so I'm not sure. And yeah.
Are you still in contact with your first ballet teacher?
No, she's passed away, unfortunately. But I'm glad that she's in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
That was important. Another important person to be in the book.
Yes. Probably the second last question, I guess. What are the best things you love about Australia and America?
The people. I love Australians and I love Americans. They're so positive and helpful. And my 2 children, both went to America and stayed with American friends of ours and went to school over there for 6 months. I didn't want my daughter to go, and my husband said, no, it'll be the making of her. And that was another transition for Sophie when she left me for 6 months. And I panicked, counted the days, and it was a great growing experience for her. And she said it was just such a relief to get away from me.
Well, we'll make this the last question from someone who's been watching tonight. What advice would you give to a person struggling with their life and not knowing which pathway they want to head to?
Well, I think Sophie had that. And I think it's putting one step in front of the other and not being frightened to talk about it or to ask for help. I certainly helped Sophie through this last period, and she was an adult. So I think that struggles can happen. I think life is struggles, and reach out to other people, because lots of people go through different struggles, and there are people that want to help.
Well, before I formally thank you for this evening, Mary, I make sure everyone tries to read Mary's Last Dance. It's a really brilliant book. Before we conclude, we'd like to announce that New South Wales Reads is starting up, and the book that we've picked for New South Wales to read is Luckies by Andrew Pipos, and you can follow at New South Wales Library Events on Instagram for more details. It's a big book club in New South Wales, so we have everyone participates. But just to conclude and to wrap up, thank you, Mary, for your generosity, your very warm responses, and your honesty. It's been really enjoyable, and I truly did enjoy the book. I really, really enjoyed it. I think I shed a tear a few times, and I do hope everyone who's read it enjoys it as much as I do. And thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Therese.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this evening.